The snow fell heavily, blanketing the dense pine forest and muffling the sounds of the world. Among the towering trees, a small wooden cabin stood with a flickering light glowing warmly from its single window. It was a humble shelter, a refuge from the biting cold of the Alaskan wilderness. Inside, an old man named Gerald stirred his pot of soup over the crackling fire. The cabin was worn but cozy, filled with mismatched furniture and trinkets collected over decades. Gerald had long chosen solitude over the chaos of society, finding solace in the quiet embrace of the forest. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it a faint, desperate cry. Gerald paused, his grip tightening on the spoon. The sound came again. A cry, fragile and frightened. Setting the pot aside, Gerald donned his heavy coat, grabbed his lantern, and opened the cabin door. The cold rushed in, sharp and relentless. Stepping out, his boots sank into the fresh snow as he followed the sound. Beneath a tree, barely visible against the snowy backdrop, lay a small figure. A girl, no older than 10, shivering and pale. Her clothes were thin and ill-suited for the harsh weather. "Hey there." Gerald's voice was gruff but gentle. The girl's eyes fluttered open, glazed and unfocused. Without hesitation, he wrapped her in his coat and lifted her into his arms. Back inside the cabin, Gerald set the girl near the fire, draping blankets over her. He knelt beside her, rubbing her cold hands, trying to bring warmth back to her fingers. "Where did you come from, kid?" he muttered softly. The girl's eyes slowly opened, glimmering with confusion. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I got lost." Gerald nodded, understanding. Whatever her story was, it could wait. Right now, she needed warmth and safety. That night, as the storm raged outside, the cabin's soft light remained steady, a beacon against the dark, cold night. Gerald watched over the girl, a protective presence he hadn't been for anyone in years. And outside, beyond the window, a pair of watchful eyes glinted from the edge of the woods, a bear, curious yet cautious, drawn by the scent of warmth and life in the lonely cabin. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, leaving a tranquil, snow-covered landscape in its wake. The girl stirred under the pile of blankets, her eyes opening slowly. Gerald had dozed off in the chair beside her, his head drooping forward, his fingers still loosely curled around a mug of now-cold tea. She sat up slowly, her gaze drifting across the cabin. The room was cluttered yet comforting. An old bookshelf stacked with worn-out novels, a faded rug beneath her feet, and the crackling fireplace that had kept the chill at bay. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket, feeling the coarse wool. The movement woke Gerald, and he straightened, rubbing his eyes. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. "You feelin' better?" Gerald finally asked. The girl nodded hesitantly. "Yes, thank you." Gerald offered a faint smile. "Got a name?" "Emma," she whispered. "Well, Emma, you had a rough night," he said gruffly. "Lucky I heard you out there." Emma glanced away, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. Her mind was a blur, a haze of memories jumbled together. She remembered walking, the endless snow, the biting wind, and then nothing. "How did you end up out here?" Gerald probed gently. Emma's brows knitted, her gaze dropping. I don't know, I was with my parents, I think. We were driving, and then something happened. I just kept walking." A weight settled on Gerald's chest. The wilderness could be merciless, especially to those unprepared for its harshness. He could only imagine what might have separated Emma from her family. "We'll figure it out," he assured her, his voice softer. "For now, you just rest." Over the following days, Emma recovered her strength. Gerald offered her simple meals, warm soup, bread, and tea. She spoke little, her eyes often distant as if searching the snow-covered woods beyond the window. Gerald respected her silence, though his curiosity lingered. What had happened to this girl to leave her alone in the wilderness? At night, while Emma slept soundly beneath the heavy blankets, Gerald found himself staring out the window. The bear, the one he had glimpsed that first night, often lingered at the edge of the forest. Its massive form, dark against the white snow, watched the cabin quietly. Gerald wondered if the bear was watching Emma. He had lived in these woods long enough to know that animals observed more than humans often realized. There was a quiet understanding in the wilderness, one that Gerald had learned to respect. As days turned to weeks, Emma began to open up. She spoke more freely, revealing fragments of her memories. She remembered the sound of her mother's voice, the warmth of her father's embrace. Yet, the details of how she had ended up in the forest remained a blur. "Do you think they're looking for me?" Emma asked one evening, her voice barely a whisper. Gerald hesitated, unsure of how to answer. He had no way of knowing if search parties scoured the woods or if Emma's family still waited for her. "I think they are," he replied softly, "and until they find you, you're safe here." That night, as the wind howled outside, the bear's shadow loomed closer to the cabin. Gerald watched from the window, his eyes locked onto the bear's watchful gaze. He wondered if the creature sensed Emma's pain, her uncertainty, a guardian drawn by the quiet sorrow of a lost child. Emma, unaware of the watchful protector beyond the window, dreamed of her family, a memory both comforting and painful. The days blended into each other, marked by the rhythms of survival, chopping wood, gathering food, and tending to the fire. Emma learned to help Gerald, her hands growing more adept with each passing day. Yet the unspoken weight remained, a truth that neither could face. Emma was lost, and the forest, as beautiful as it was, held no answers. Gerald's solitude, once a chosen refuge, now felt heavy, a reminder of a world beyond the trees, and the bear watched, always watching. A silent sentinel at the edge of the wilderness, bound by instincts deeper than understanding. Winter's grip tightened and the nights grew colder. The snow piled higher, making the forest seem even more impenetrable. Gerald knew they couldn't stay isolated forever. The forest, while a sanctuary, could also become a prison. But for now, they remained. A lost girl, a reclusive man, and a watchful bear, their fates intertwined in the frozen embrace of the wilderness. The following morning, the storm had subsided, leaving a pristine, white expanse outside the cabin. Gerald awoke early, his bones stiff and sore, but his mind alert. He glanced at the girl, still curled beneath the blankets, her breathing steady. He brewed a pot of coffee, its bitter aroma mixing with the lingering warmth of the fire. As the steam rose, Gerald's gaze drifted to the window. Snow clung to the glass, distorting the view of the forest beyond. Yet, just beyond the tree line, a shadow moved, slow and deliberate. The bear. It was a large grizzly, its fur thick and matted from the storm. Gerald had seen it before, an old creature, scarred from battles with rivals and harsh winters. It had never approached the cabin before, content to roam the deeper woods, but now its eyes seemed to fix on the window, watching. Gerald's fingers tightened around the mug. The presence of the girl had brought a vulnerability to the cabin, a fragility he hadn't considered. The bear's curiosity could easily become a threat. As the girl stirred awake, Gerald turned his focus to her. She blinked at him, eyes still hazy with sleep. "Good morning," he greeted softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Morning. What's your name, kid?" "Lena," she replied, her gaze lowering. "I got lost." "My family. There was a camp. I don't know where they are." Gerald's chest tightened. The forest was vast, unmerciful to the unprepared. If her family had camped near the woods, there was a chance they were still searching, frantic and fearful. "Do you remember where you came from? Which direction?" Lena's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know. I ran when the storm got worse." Gerald placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find them. Just need to wait out the snow a bit more." Throughout the day, Gerald and Lena shared small conversations, fragments of her life before the storm. She spoke of her parents, her little brother, and their camping trip meant to be an adventure. Her voice trembled when she recalled the panic of the storm, the whiteout that had separated her from her family. Outside, the bear's presence remained. Occasionally, Gerald glimpsed it through the window, watching, waiting. The weight of its gaze was unsettling, yet there was a strange calm in its vigilance. As the day wore on, Gerald's instincts sharpened. He knew the wilderness well, each ridge, each hidden trail. The bear's constant presence became a concern. Was it waiting for an opportunity, drawn by the scent of the girl and the warmth of the cabin? Or did it sense the vulnerability that now lingered inside? Gerald took to preparing the cabin with more caution. He checked the locks on the windows, reinforced the wooden door, and gathered wood to ensure the fire never waned. Lena watched him, a silent witness to his concern. She noticed his wary glances out the window, the way his eyes lingered on the shadow at the edge of the woods. "Is there something out there?" Lena asked hesitantly. Gerald considered his response. "There's a bear. Seen it before, but it usually keeps its distance." "Will it try to get in?" "Not if we're careful," he assured her. "Bears don't like trouble unless they're desperate." That night, as the fire crackled softly and Lena drifted into a restless sleep, Gerald sat by the window. The bear lingered at the edge of the woods, a silent sentinel. Its dark eyes met his for a brief moment, a mutual understanding passing between them. Both were protectors, one of a home long claimed, the other of a child newly found. As the night deepened, Gerald wondered if the bear's presence was a threat or a guardian of its own kind. In the quiet hours before dawn, Gerald found himself waking suddenly, a chill running through him. The cabin was silent, the fire reduced to embers. He looked to the window and saw the bear standing closer than ever, its massive form a silhouette against the moonlit snow. For a moment, Gerald's heart quickened, a primal fear tightening his chest. But the bear did not move toward the cabin. It simply stared, a quiet contemplation in its dark eyes. Gerald stood, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the creature. For a long while, neither moved. Man and beast caught in a fragile moment of understanding. Finally, the bear turned and lumbered back into the forest, its heavy steps fading into the snow. Gerald remained by the window, the weight of the encounter settling over him. In the days that followed, the forest seemed to breathe again, its silence less oppressive. Gerald and Lena began venturing outside cautiously. He taught her how to navigate the woods, how to listen to the whispers of the trees and the crunch of the snow. Lena's fear began to fade, replaced by a growing trust in Gerald and a curiosity about the world around them. The bear's presence was felt but unseen, an invisible guardian lingering at the edge of their shared solitude. Gerald could sense it, watching from the shadows, its gaze protective rather than predatory. One morning, as the sun broke through the clouds and glinted off the snow, Gerald saw them. Footprints in the snow, too many to be just his own. The realization struck him with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Lena," he called softly. She joined him at the window, her eyes widening as she saw the tracks. Her family had come searching, desperately scouring the forest for the daughter they had lost. Gerald's heart ached. He knew what it meant. Lena would soon be leaving. The cabin would return to its quiet, and the bear would return to its solitude. That night, as Lena slept peacefully, Gerald watched the fire's glow dance along the cabin walls. Outside, a shadow moved. The bear, a silent witness to the farewell that loomed. Gerald's eyes met the bear's once more, a final moment of mutual understanding. The protector of the forest and the protector of the child, both bound by instincts older than memory. In the morning, the sound of distant voices reached the cabin. Lena's family had come. Gerald's heart was heavy as he opened the door, watching as the girl reunited with those she had feared she lost. Tears of joy mixed with the cold air, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. From the shadows the bear watched, its eyes reflecting the quiet farewell it had shared with Gerald. The bond between man and beast, unspoken yet understood, lingered like a memory in the cold, silent snow. Days turned to weeks, and the winter's grip remained unrelenting. Gerald and Lena settled into a quiet rhythm, each day a step closer to the thaw that would allow them to search for her family. Yet, the bear's presence at the forest's edge never faltered. It became a shadow in their days and a guardian in their nights. The cabin had become a sanctuary, a space where silence spoke louder than words. Gerald had long been accustomed to his solitude, yet Lena's presence had softened the hard edges of his isolation. Each morning, they shared quiet breakfasts by the fire, the crackling wood the only sound. Lena's guardedness had lessened. The fear that had once dominated her eyes had given way to a cautious trust. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, Lena ventured a bit farther than usual, her curiosity tugging her deeper into the forest. Snow still coated the ground, though patches had begun to soften and melt. As she bent to pick up a branch, a flicker of movement caught her eye. The bear. It stood still, massive yet composed, its dark, inquisitive eyes meeting hers. For a heartbeat, Lena froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The bear's size was overwhelming, a living force of the wild. Yet its presence was not aggressive. It seemed to regard her with the same curiosity she felt, a mutual hesitation suspended in the cold air. Her instinct was to run, to flee back to the safety of the cabin, but something held her still. A silent understanding passed between them, a realization that this creature had been there all along, watching, waiting. She had heard of animals that protected what they considered their territory, but this felt different, deeper. The spell was broken by a voice, Gerald's, steady and calm. "Don't move, Lena." She glanced over her shoulder to see him standing at the tree line, his eyes fixed on the bear. The tension in the air was palpable, a thread that could snap at any moment. The bear's gaze shifted to Gerald, recognition flickering in its eyes. Perhaps it had come to know the man by the window, the watchful figure who kept the fire burning. For a long moment, the three of them stood in that suspended silence, an old man, a lost girl, and a creature of the wilderness. Finally, the bear lowered its head, a gesture that was neither submission nor threat. It was acknowledgement, a shared space between them. Slowly, it turned and retreated into the deeper woods, leaving behind a trail of heavy, deliberate paw prints. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Gerald's hand found her shoulder, a grounding presence. "You okay, kid?" She nodded, her eyes still fixed on the place where the bear had disappeared. I think it was just curious." Gerald's expression was thoughtful, his gaze lingering on the forest. Maybe, or maybe it knows more than we think. That night, the cabin felt different. The air inside was warmer, the fire's glow reaching further into the corners. As Lena drifted off to sleep, her mind replayed the encounter, those dark eyes that had seen her, truly seen her. Gerald sat by the window, his old rifle resting across his knees, but it felt less like a weapon and more like a formality, a habit he could not break. Outside, the bear's shadow moved between the trees, a silent guardian beneath the silver light of the moon. Gerald's eyes followed it, a quiet respect settling in his chest. The forest had changed. What once felt like a boundary between wilderness and safety had become a shared space, a fragile, unspoken truce. As days passed, the thaw became more apparent. The forest woke slowly, the snow retreating, and patches of earth reappearing. The streams began to flow again, their icy waters whispering of spring's approach. Gerald and Lena began to prepare for the journey, gathering supplies, mapping the way toward the nearest town where they might find word of her family. Yet the thought of leaving weighed on them both. The cabin had become a home, a refuge built from necessity but sustained by an unspoken bond. Gerald saw it in Lena's hesitant steps as they packed, her reluctance to leave the space that had kept her safe. The bear's presence became less frequent as the snow melted, but it remained a part of their days, an echo in the woods, a shadow at the edge of vision. Gerald wondered if the bear understood that the time of parting was near. Perhaps, in its own way, it had already said goodbye. On the last night before they were set to leave, Gerald and Lena sat by the fire, the silence heavy but comforting. Lena traced patterns in the worn wood of the table, her thoughts far away. "Gerald," she began softly, "do you think the bear will be okay when we leave?" Gerald considered the question. "The bear's made it through more winters than I have, I reckon. It'll be fine. But it's been watching over us, hasn't it?" "Maybe we've been watching over each other," he replied quietly. In the morning, as they stepped outside with their packs, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The air was sharp and clear, the sun glinting off the remaining patches of snow. Gerald adjusted the straps of his pack and glanced back at the cabin, his home, his sanctuary. Lena's gaze lingered on the trees, her eyes searching for a glimpse of fur, a flicker of movement. But the bear remained unseen, a presence felt rather than witnessed. As they began their walk, a sound broke the silence, a low, resonant huff that echoed through the forest. They turned, and there it stood, just beyond the tree line, watching them. Lena raised her hand in a silent farewell, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears. Gerald nodded, his throat tight. The bear watched them for a moment longer before it turned away, melting back into the wilderness that had always been its home. As they walked away, the cabin grew smaller behind them, the forest reclaiming its space. Gerald knew that the bear would remain, a guardian of the quiet woods, a silent protector of the cabin that had once been a refuge for a lost girl and an old man seeking peace. And in his heart, he carried the weight of that bond, a bond beyond fear, beyond wilderness, a bond that had changed them all. As the days grew longer and the snow began to retreat, a sense of inevitability settled over the cabin. The relentless grip of winter finally loosened, revealing patches of earth beneath the thawing ice. Streams that had been frozen solid began to babble once more, their melodies a signal that the world outside was awakening. Gerald felt it first, a restlessness that hinted at the need to act. For weeks he had sheltered Lena, a stranger who had become a companion. The bear's watchful eyes had been a constant presence, a reminder of the unpredictable yet strangely protective force of the wild. Yet, now, with the forest opening up, the time to search for Lena's family had arrived. He shared the decision with her gently over breakfast, his voice steady. "Lena, the snow's finally letting up. It's time we tried to find your family." Lena's spoon paused mid-air, her expression conflicted. For a moment, Gerald wondered if she had thought this sanctuary would last forever. Yet, the glimmer of hope in her eyes betrayed her longing. "Do you think they're still out there?" she whispered. "I do," Gerald replied, his tone firm. "And they're probably looking for you every day." They prepared over the next 2 days. Gerald packed a small rucksack with food, a map, and spare clothing. Lena, with her youthful energy restored, helped gather firewood and sort through the supplies. Each task was a reminder that this chapter was closing, a truth that rested heavy on both their hearts. The bear remained a steady figure at the edge of the woods, an ever-present guardian. Gerald had stopped viewing it as a threat. The lines between man and beast had blurred, leaving behind only an understanding, an unspoken pact that bound them. On the morning of their departure, the sun was a rare visitor, casting pale rays through the skeletal branches of the trees. The forest, once a white wilderness, now hinted at green beneath the melting snow. Gerald and Lena set out, their breath visible in the cold air. The girl clutched his hand, her grip tight yet trusting. The bear trailed them at a distance, its massive form a shadow that blended with the trees. Gerald glanced back occasionally, seeing the creature's slow, deliberate steps. They navigated the paths, searching for any signs, tracks, remnants of campsites, or voices carried on the wind. Each step was a balance between hope and doubt. Gerald worried about what they might find, if the family had moved on or worse. After hours of trekking, as the sun began to dip, voices echoed faintly, frantic, desperate calls that sent a shiver through the air. "Lena! Lena!" The girl's head shot up, her eyes wide. Her grip tightened around Gerald's fingers before she let go, the name of her mother spilling from her lips as she ran. A man and a woman emerged from the trees, faces etched with fear and exhaustion. When their eyes fell upon Lena, disbelief transformed into overwhelming relief. The reunion was a collision of tears, embraces, and fragmented apologies. Gerald stood back, watching with a bittersweet ache. Lena's mother pulled her close, her eyes glimmering with gratitude as she glanced at Gerald. "Thank you," she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. Gerald nodded, his throat tight. There was nothing more to say. As the family began their return, Lena paused, her gaze shifting beyond Gerald, toward the forest's edge. The bear stood there, a silent, unmoving figure. The girl's eyes met the animal's, a moment suspended in time, a farewell without words. The bear huffed softly, a sound that was neither threat nor fear. It was an acknowledgement, a parting of ways that carried a weight deeper than the snow itself. Lena turned to Gerald, a tearful yet grateful smile breaking through her expression. "Goodbye, Gerald. Thank you for everything." Gerald's voice was steady, though his heart trembled. "Take care, kid. Be safe." As the family disappeared into the woods, Gerald remained still. The bear, too, lingered a moment longer before retreating into the forest, its form melding with the shadows. When Gerald returned to the cabin, it felt both fuller and emptier. The quiet was deeper without Lena's presence, but the memories of their days together remained vivid. The bear no longer haunted the edges of his home, its role as a guardian fulfilled. Gerald sat by the fire that evening, his gaze on the flickering flames. The wilderness outside was vast, untamed, yet it had granted him a bond, one with a child who had found solace in his solitude, and a creature whose loyalty defied its nature. The forest had given and taken, its silent language unyielding yet profoundly compassionate. Gerald knew that somewhere in those woods the bear roamed, wild and free, an emblem of the untamed spirit that had watched over them all. And as the fire crackled and the snow melted, Gerald found peace in the silence, a guardian no longer needed but forever remembered.